Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the receipts. My name is Elliot Graves. I'm 43, and until recently, I was the lead infrastructure architect at a mid-sized logistics tech firm in Chicago. 13 years. That's how long I gave to that company, designing every core system from the ground up, training two generations of junior analysts, and stepping in every time a client was on the brink of walking. I was never flashy, I didn't talk big, and I didn't take credit in meetings. I just fixed things, quietly, effectively. But in corporate life, that's not always enough. They don't reward loyalty, they reward noise. Everything changed when they hired Ava Torres, the new director of digital transformation. She was 31, a polished talker from a flashier firm out west. She had the CEO laughing within minutes of her first town hall, wore power suits like armor, talked about agile disruption and vertical innovation every 5 minutes. She looked at me and saw dead weight. Not because I wasn't delivering, I was, but I wasn't loud about it. I wasn't marketable. Within 3 months, she restructured my team, reassigned my best junior staff, and started reviewing the systems I built. I kept calm. I documented everything. I knew I had to play the long game. Then came the coup. A Friday morning meeting. HR was there. So was Ava. I didn't need to hear the whole speech to know what was coming. Downsizing. Strategic pivot. My position no longer aligned with the company's vision. Just like that, 13 years, gone. No severance negotiation. No transition period. Just a signature and a quiet escort out of the building with my box of desk stuff. They thought it was over. But Ava had made one mistake. She didn't know the full extent of what I'd built or who still trusted me outside those walls. And what came next? That's when the story really started. They say when a door closes, a window opens, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes you have to build the damn window yourself brick by brick. The days after I was fired were quiet. Too quiet. I'd never realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in that job. My morning routine felt meaningless. The silence at 9 a.m., when I should have been running team stand-ups or debugging infrastructure bugs, was deafening. The worst part? I didn't even tell my kids right away. I didn't want them to think their dad had failed. But I wasn't broken. Humiliated? Yes. Angry? Absolutely. But broken? Never. The first week I rested. The second, I got to work. I dusted off an idea I'd had years ago, a cloud-agnostic integration framework that could help smaller logistics companies compete with giants like FedEx and Amazon. I'd pitched it to my old company 2 years earlier. Ava had waved it off as overly ambitious. Now it was mine, and I was going to build it on my terms. I turned my garage into a makeshift office, reached out to 3 ex-colleagues who had left before Ava's reign. 2 were freelance devs now. The third had her own small dev shop. They believed in me. And more importantly, they remembered the systems I'd built. They knew I wasn't some relic. We called ourselves Gravestone Systems, a nod to both my last name and the company that had buried me. I didn't have VC money. Didn't want it. What I did have was trust, scars, and a product that actually worked. By the end of month 3, we had a prototype. By month 5, we'd onboarded our first client, a Midwestern delivery startup, bleeding cash because of a bloated AWS contract and legacy code nobody understood. We slashed their overhead by 38% in 2 weeks. After that, they couldn't stop talking about us. Word spread. I wasn't trying to build a unicorn. I just wanted to build something honest and useful. Then came the 6th month. And with it, him. Jay Weller, CFO of my old company. He was one of the few execs I'd actually liked. He was never warm, but he respected quiet competence. I hadn't heard from him since the day I was fired. Now he was calling me on a Sunday. "Elliot," he said, "we have a problem." I let him talk. Turned out Ava's digital overhaul had been a disaster. She'd replaced half the company's internal systems with outsourced platforms that didn't integrate properly. Customer orders were vanishing. Shipping data was corrupted. Half their East Coast warehouse network had gone offline for 3 days the previous week. Investors were panicking. Clients were threatening to walk. Their infrastructure, my infrastructure, had been dismantled. And Ava? She'd jumped ship a week ago to join a flashy fintech firm in San Francisco. Now they were left with the ruins, and Jake was asking for help. Not offering a job. Begging for a lifeline. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I told him I'd think about it. And I did. That night, I walked into my kids' room. They were asleep, my son curled up with the same dinosaur plush he's had since he was 3. My daughter, one leg hanging off the bed, mouth half open, snoring lightly. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing in the moment. And I remembered why I'd built Gravestone in the first place. Not to get revenge. To build something better. The next morning, I called Jake back. "I'll help," I said, "but not for free." He asked what I meant. So I laid it out. I wouldn't work for them. They would work with me. Gravestone would become their infrastructure partner, full contract, full billing, full control. We'd rebuild what Ava broke and then some. But I was done playing employee. I wanted respect. I wanted autonomy. And I wanted a clause in writing. I picked the team. It was a bold ask. But they had no choice. By week's end, we had a 6-month consulting contract signed. My rate? 3 times what I earned before. And this time, I was the one bringing people on board, including a few junior devs Ava had thrown under the bus when things went south. Funny how karma works. Walking back into that building for the first time since they fired me was surreal. People stared, some looked guilty, others just looked confused. Jake met me at the door. HR pretended to smile, but I kept it professional. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for impact. But don't think for a second I forgot. I still had the email Ava sent, the one where she called me a legacy bottleneck holding the org back. I printed it out, framed it, hung it in my new home office above my desk. A reminder of what people think they know and how wrong they can be. By the end of that quarter, Gravestone had restored system stability, integrated a new hybrid cloud architecture, and onboarded 2 more clients through word-of-mouth referrals. We were small, nimble, unstoppable. I didn't get my old job back. I built something better. And every time someone from my old company emailed us asking how they could join Gravestone, I smiled, because the best revenge is earning your peace and letting your work speak louder than their ego ever could. They tried to erase me. Instead, they made me unforgettable. The day Gravestone Systems took over full infrastructure operations for Hartley Company, the company that once kicked me out like an old spreadsheet, felt like standing in the eye of a storm I once thought would destroy me. But now, I controlled the wind. And I wasn't interested in payback. Not the petty kind. I wanted legacy. The team I assembled for the integration project was lean but lethal. Sarah, my ex-backend architect, who Ava had publicly blamed for a failed rollout. That was, in truth, Ava's own mismanaged decision. Marvin, an old intern of mine, who now coded cleaner than 90% of the people they'd kept. And Ingrid, a cybersecurity specialist who'd once begged for a promotion and been told she was too passive. Now, she was leading our security design. One by one, I took back what was mine, not with anger, but with excellence. And let me tell you something about excellence. It doesn't just silence critics, it converts them. The first 3 weeks were brutal. Their systems were such a mess, we couldn't even map dependencies properly. Half the logs were corrupted, server calls failed silently, and their customer complaint tickets were buried under a UX disaster of a help desk platform. No documentation, no continuity, just chaos. But we didn't flinch. My team didn't just fix things, we documented them, explained them, translated them for the execs in a way they could understand. No jargon, no ego, just solutions. I watched the same board members who nodded while Ava dismissed me now hang on every word in my presentations. I wasn't arrogant about it. I had nothing to prove. But they saw it. You could see it in their eyes. We were wrong about him. And I didn't need to hear them say it. I already knew. Then came the proposal. 6 weeks in, Jake Weller pulled me aside after a review meeting. "We want to extend the partnership," he said, flipping his notebook open. "Year-long, possibly longer. Maybe even bring you back on board. C-level. We're restructuring." I smiled, and I said, "Jake, I appreciate that. I do, but I'm not coming back." He blinked. "It's not personal," I continued, "but I didn't spend the last 8 months rebuilding my career to go back to a system that once told me I didn't belong. I'm not a department head anymore. I'm building something cleaner, smarter, and freer." He respected it. He didn't like it, but he respected it. We settled on a 12-month partnership contract. Gravestone would remain external, autonomous, and untouchable, and I would mentor 2 of their newly promoted team leads, 2 bright, overlooked women who'd been buried under admin work for years. That was the kind of legacy I wanted. Meanwhile, our other clients were multiplying. Gravestone became known for precision recovery, small to mid-sized companies in crisis who needed fast, honest, quiet help. We didn't advertise. We didn't need to. Reputation moved faster than any campaign. And with every passing month, I felt more like myself than I had in a decade. But I would be lying if I said I never thought about Ava. She'd disappeared after the collapse. Rumors said she'd lasted only 4 months at the fintech startup before being restructured out. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't care, really. But the past has a way of knocking again when you least expect it. One rainy Wednesday, I got an email. Subject, coffee, from Ava Richardson. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened it. "Elliot, I don't expect a warm reception. I've been watching what you've built. And I realize now that I never really understood what you did or how much people trusted you. I'm in a very different place now. And if there's any chance you'd be willing to talk, I'd appreciate it. No excuses, no begging, no dramatic monologue. Just a real human moment." I thought about it for 3 days, and then I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe far from downtown. She looked older, tired, but no longer guarded. We didn't rehash the past. She didn't try to justify it. Instead, she told me she was considering consulting, and she wanted advice. Not connections, not recommendations. Just honest insight. And strangely, I gave it to her. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being angry. Not because she didn't deserve my anger, but because I had better things to carry. Forgiveness is heavy, but bitterness is heavier. As we left the cafe, she turned to me. "You know, I really thought I was building something bold back then." "You were," I replied. "You just forgot to build with people, not over them." She nodded. We never spoke again after that. And I never needed to. That weekend, Gravestone onboarded a new partner, a logistics company, run by a woman who'd once been turned down by Hartley for being too niche. Now she ran 5 warehouses across 3 states. We gave her the tools she needed to scale with dignity. I walked into my office that night, sat down, looked at the framed email above my desk again. And I whispered to no one in particular. Not bad for dead weight? Some people build empires out of revenge, and I built mine so I'd never have to look back. By the end of that fiscal quarter, Gravestone Systems had grown beyond anything I initially imagined. We weren't just solving broken systems anymore, we were designing futures. Our clients weren't desperate startups clawing their way out of collapse. They were rising mid-tier companies who wanted what we had: structure, clarity, and quiet power. It was strange, really. For years, I thought I was just a cog. A good one, sure, but replaceable. Necessary, but never central. And now, I was the blueprint people wanted to copy. We hired 2 more engineers, then 3, then a whole UI/UX team. I brought in Celia, my old rival from an industry competition back in 2012, to run design. and she turned our dashboards into works of art. Clients didn't just love them, they understood them. That was rare in our field. But with growth came noise. Some of the new hires didn't know where we'd started. They joined us already in motion, assuming Gravestone had always been this stable, this polished. They joked about our minimalist office, about how we didn't do startup aesthetics. I let them talk, because I remembered what it felt like to walk into a room and be invisible. I remembered what it meant to sit in silence while someone else took credit for your work. I never wanted anyone in my company to feel that way, not even the ones who didn't understand what came before. That's why I still interviewed every single hire personally, not to test their skills, to test their values. And that's when Mia applied. She was smart, too smart maybe. Recent MIT grad, 3 internships, confident and sharp-tongued. She had the kind of resume that screamed, "Tech golden child," and she walked into the interview with a smile that said she knew it. But what caught me wasn't her technical knowledge. It was what she said when I asked her, "Why do you want to be here? Why Gravestone?" She paused. "I got a rejection from Hartley 2 years ago," she said. "No feedback, no reply. I remember crying in my dorm room, then I found your name. Read your story. I don't want to work where people climb over each other. I want to build with people who still remember what falling feels like." I hired her on the spot. 3 months later, she was leading 2 critical client migrations and mentoring an intern on the side. Not because I told her to, because she understood. Strength isn't about stepping on others. It's about lifting while you climb. But not everyone agreed. One of our new VPs, a guy named Russell, came from a more aggressive background. Big contracts, big ego, big gestures. He didn't like that we operated quietly. He said our brand was too soft. "You're not competing anymore, Elliot," he told me in a strategy meeting. "You've already won. It's time to act like it. Let's acquire, expand, dominate." I listened. And then I fired him. Not because he was wrong, but because he was wrong for us. Gravestone was never about domination. It was about redemption, about creation. And if we started acting like the very companies that once wrote me off, we'd lose the very soul that made us different. Still, his words stuck with me. Success makes you loud, but meaning keeps you honest. And I'd rather be meaningful than massive. Then came the email that shook me more than I expected. It was from my son, Nathan. So, we hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since his mother, my ex, moved him to the East Coast. He was 15 now, too smart for his own good, and too angry at me for missing too many birthdays during the Hartley years. His message was simple. "Hey, I saw the Wired article about you. Mom says you're too busy, but if you're not, I'd like to visit. Not for long, just want to see what you're building. If that's okay." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't cried in years, but I cried then. And when he arrived that weekend, everything I'd built every long night, every burned bridge, every painful step suddenly mattered in a way that nothing else ever had. I showed him the office, introduced him to Mia and Sarah and Marvin, let him shadow our team meetings, scribble notes, ask ridiculous questions about our back-end code. He smiled more in those 2 days than I'd seen in 5 years. And on the second night, as we sat in my small downtown apartment, no fancy skyline, no penthouse illusion, he looked around and said, "People here, they respect you." I nodded. "Because I finally learned to respect myself first." He grinned. "Think you'd hire me one day?" I laughed. "I think you're already hired. But first you finish high school, then we'll talk." That moment, that tiny private flicker of peace, was worth more than every contract I'd ever signed. Because the truth is, revenge is loud. But healing? Healing is quiet. And I was finally healing. You can spend your whole life chasing peace, but sometimes peace finds you when you stop running. I didn't realize how much I'd changed until I saw Thomas again. He didn't email, didn't call, didn't even schedule a meeting through my assistant. One afternoon, as I stepped out of a client demo at our new Midtown office, he was just there, sitting in the waiting area, thumbing through a Gravestone Systems brochure, like it meant nothing. Thomas Price, the man who 2 years earlier called me a reliable seat filler, the man who escorted me out of Hartley's doors with a pat on the back and a file labeled transition packet. And now he looked smaller. Not just older, not just more tired. Diminished. He stood up when he saw me, but didn't offer a handshake. "Elliot," he said, "didn't know if you'd be in." I stared at him, forcing every muscle in my face to stay neutral. "Yet here you are." He exhaled, clearly expecting something warmer. I didn't offer it. "I read about Gravestone," he continued. "Congratulations. Seems like you've built something serious." "I didn't build it to be congratulated." "Fair enough." There was a pause, too long. Then he dropped it. "Hartley's in trouble." "Ah, there it is." I said nothing. Let him fumble in the silence. "We overextended," he admitted. "Investors pulled, then layoffs, then a whistleblower, some compliance issue, PR nightmare. 3 senior partners walked." "And?" I asked, voice steady. "And we need help." He looked at me then. Really looked. "It's not just about patching systems. The place is fractured. Nobody trusts anyone. We've lost clients. Talented people are fleeing." I thought, maybe you could consult, even temporarily. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I asked, "Why me?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because you knew how to hold things together, even when we didn't deserve it." That stung more than it should have. It would have been so easy to say no, to relish the moment, to throw his desperation back in his face. But I wasn't that man anymore. Revenge felt good in theory, but in practice, it only made you hollow. Still, I didn't say yes. Not yet. Instead, I told him I'd think about it. And then I walked back into the office where Mia was whiteboarding out a new client portal redesign with 2 interns and our marketing lead. My team, my vision, my values. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, cold tea in one hand, Nathan's school project on my lap. He'd asked me to review it, something about automation ethics and data mining. Sharp kid. And I kept thinking, why did I start Gravestone? It wasn't to crush Hartley or to make Thomas beg. It was to build something better, something that lasted, something that never forgot where it came from. The next morning, I made my decision. I didn't agree to fix Hartley, but I offered to train their remaining leadership. 1 workshop, 1 week, among. That's it. Because if they were going to survive, they needed to earn it the hard way, just like I did. The workshop was tense. Half of them didn't want to be there. The other half were desperate not to lose their jobs. I opened with a single question. What's the one thing your teams are most afraid to tell you? The silence was brutal. But then someone finally spoke. A woman named Erica from Product Strategy. "That you only listen to numbers," she said, "not people." That cracked something open. By the 3rd day, we were diagramming whole new workflows. Real conversations were happening. Someone cried. Someone else confessed they'd considered leaving the industry altogether. And on the final day, Thomas pulled me aside. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." He swallowed hard. "Why did you?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Because you forgot how to lead. But people still believed in me. And I won't let your failure take them down with you." Then I walked away. Back to Gravestone. Back home. Because in the end, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to become the kind of leader I'd once been searching for. And now I was. Some betrayals cut deep, but the worst ones, they come dressed as respect. The week after the Hartley workshop, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't guilt. It was something harder to name, like a ghost that used to haunt me, had returned in a new form. I'd gone back to the battlefield, but this time I wasn't wounded. I was the one holding the map, the one others followed. Still, something about Thomas's face lingered. That hollow look, that need. Not for forgiveness, for validation. He wanted me to say he wasn't the villain, and I wouldn't give it to him. Back at Gravestone, we were hitting a growth spurt. 3 new clients, a funding offer, a keynote invite at a tech ethics conference in Seattle. Mia said it felt like we were finally graduating from survival mode. She wasn't wrong. But something shifted in the team dynamic. Small things. Attention in meetings. A senior engineer asking why we were hiring so fast. A junior associate confiding in me that she overheard one of the directors talking to a recruiter just in case. I called a leadership check-in. Everyone showed up. Everyone smiled. But their eyes didn't. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I stayed late. I walked the halls and I listened. And what I heard was a whisper I never thought I'd hear in my company. He's becoming just like them. Them? Hartley. The very system we'd all vowed to be better than. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I opened an old doc, my original mission outline for Gravestone Systems, written in the dead of night 2 weeks after my firing. Back then, I'd poured my soul into it. And I realized something terrifying. I hadn't read it in over a year. That next morning, I tore up our org chart, called in Mia and the founding team, and I laid it all out. We've drifted, I said. We became efficient. We became fast. But somewhere in there, we lost the very thing that made this worth building. Silence. Then Mia nodded, slow. We've been moving too fast. I nodded back. It's time we stop trying to grow like them and start leading like us. We rewrote the roadmap, paused the expansion, invested deeper into team health, mentorship, feedback cycles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And then the call came. From Hartley's board chair. Not Thomas, above Thomas. He said Thomas had stepped down. Internal reasons? I didn't ask. But then came the twist. They offered me his job. CEO, full control, triple my current equity at Gravestone, a legacy seat on the Hartley Trust. And all I had to do was walk away. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I just asked for time. Later that night, I met Mia on the rooftop of our building. The skyline shimmered behind her like something out of a movie. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the one question that stopped me cold. If you go back, will you still be you? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the decision was coming. And the ghosts were circling. Again. Every ghost I thought I'd buried came back wearing a name tag. I didn't sleep that night either. It's strange how silence gets louder when you're standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. The offer from Hartley hung in my inbox like a lit fuse. I didn't click it, didn't forward it, didn't speak of it again. But it was there, breathing. Mia had gone quiet too. Not angry, not distant, just thoughtful. She knew this wasn't about ambition anymore, and this was about something older, deeper. The part of me that still hadn't let go of Hartley. Or maybe the part that hadn't forgiven myself for what I became there. The next day, I did something I hadn't done since Gravestone's earliest months. I walked in without a plan, no schedule, no meetings, no notes, just me and my people. I sat beside the marketing interns during coffee break. I dropped in on our junior dev stand-up. I pulled up a chair in operations and asked, "What's one thing I'm doing that makes your job harder?" At first, they laughed like I was joking. Then one of them, Aaron, a sharp, soft-spoken analyst, said something that hit harder than any investor pitch or corporate backstab ever could. "You're not in the company anymore, Elliot. You're above it." It wasn't said with malice, just observation. But it cracked something open in me. Because he was right. I'd been so busy proving I could build something better than Hartley that I forgot why I wanted to build it in the first place. Not just to succeed, not just to win, but to belong. to create a place where no one had to feel like they didn't matter just because they weren't at the top. I thanked him. And later that night, I stared at the offer again. I knew the choice would come down to this: return to the empire that cast me out, or stay and rebuild the home I chose. But then life, as always, threw in a variable I didn't see coming. At 2:43 a.m., I got a call. Block number. I almost didn't pick up, but something in my gut told me to. A voice answered. Familiar. Low. Tired. Elliot, it's James. My brother. I hadn't heard his voice in 7 years. Not since he screamed at me through plexiglass in that visitation room and told me to go back to your precious office tower and forget you ever had a brother. I froze. James? He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for years. I need to see you. Silence. Now. We met in a diner on the edge of the city, one of those places where the coffee's burnt and the waitress has seen more pain than most therapists. I saw him through the window before he saw me. He looked older, not just physically, though the years hadn't been kind, but weary, like life had sanded down every rough edge and left it behind something brittle and sharp. I walked in. He didn't stand. He just said, "Took you long enough." I sat. No hug, no handshake, just the quiet hum of neon and the clink of mugs. He got to it fast. "I'm in trouble." I figured. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something that wasn't anger. It wasn't pride either. It was fear. After I got out, I tried to go straight. Really, got a warehouse job. Met a woman. Tried to keep my head down. And, he ran a hand through his hair, I borrowed from the wrong people. Thought I could flip it into something clean. I was wrong. How much? 32 grand. I blinked. James, I'm not asking for your money, he said quickly. I'm asking for your help. He pulled out a flash drive. What's this? Proof. The guys I borrowed from. They're laundering money through small logistics firms. I stumbled into it. Thought I could sell the info and pay off my debt. And now? They want the drive, and they think I already sold them out. Did you? No, I came to you instead. A silence settled between us. So many years, so many fights, and now, this? You didn't come to me when Mom died. You didn't come when I was fired. Why now? He looked down at his hands. Because this time, I know I won't make it out without you. And that was the thing. All these years, I thought I'd cut James out of my life because he was reckless, toxic, selfish. But maybe, just maybe, I'd cut him out because I couldn't stand seeing someone fall apart the same way I almost had. I took the flash drive. Give me 48 hours. He nodded once. I stood, and just before I left, I said, I'm not doing this because you're my brother. He looked up. I'm doing it because I want to believe people like us can still be saved. Back at the office, I called Mia. Told her everything. To my surprise, she didn't question it, didn't scold me. She just said, tell me what you need. By dawn, our legal team was mobilized. Mia had pulled 3 favors from her days in corporate compliance, and within hours we had verified James's files and traced the money. It was real. And it was ugly. Worse, one of the shell companies was tied to Hartley's offshore logistics arm. It was buried in layers of LLCs and blind trusts, but the thread was there. I called the board chair. He didn't sound surprised. Let me guess, I said. Thomas knew. A pause. Then, we've been trying to keep it internal. I laughed. Of course you have. He didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, does this change your answer? I looked out the window. At my team. At my brother asleep on the couch in my office. At Mia, pacing through call after call, her eyes fierce. Then I looked at the offer again. And for the first time since they fired me, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. I clicked delete. Then I called the authorities. When you stop chasing revenge, the truth starts chasing you. The morning didn't start with coffee. Aye. It started with 37 unread emails, 4 subpoenas, and 1 urgent letter from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I hadn't expected things to move this fast. After I handed over everything, the offshore shell company maps, the falsified vendor contracts, the shadow accounts, I expected a slow burn, a gradual investigation, quiet probes. Instead, it was a wildfire. And the spark that lit it? A single wire transfer, one I had flagged and forwarded to the right agent. It tied Mason directly to a Panamanian holding firm that had no employees, no real services, and was funneling millions in consulting fees. I just watched as it all unraveled from my small, rented apartment downtown. I was far from the glass walls and leather chairs now, but closer to the truth than I'd ever been. The company went into emergency mode, board meetings behind closed doors, whispers and corners. Mason stopped showing up at the office entirely, and the people who once nodded at him in every hallway started saying his name in hushed tones like it was cursed. But I knew Mason. He wouldn't go down quietly. He didn't. Within a week, I got an email, anonymous, untraceable, just a single line. You forget who taught you the game. I stared at the screen for a long time. The game. He always saw it like that. A series of moves, sacrifices, power plays, and consequences only mattered if they landed on someone else's head. But this time, the board had changed, and people were watching. I kept my distance, stayed off social media, deleted old contacts. But information has a way of finding its target. One of my old interns, Alicia, reached out. She sounded breathless on the call. They're saying you turned the whole thing in, that you're the whistleblower. I stayed silent. She continued, Elliot, some people are angry, scared. A few think you're a hero. But Mason, he's losing it. His house, raided. Assets frozen. His assistant quit and is testifying. I wanted to feel something. Triumph, relief, peace. But all I felt was empty. Was this what revenge tasted like? A month passed. Then 2. And that's when the interviews started. SEC, FBI, internal auditors, journalists, lawyers. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Of me. I kept it clean, precise, no ego, no embellishments, just facts. And slowly a picture emerged for the world to see not just of a corrupt executive, but of an entire ecosystem built to protect him. It wasn't just Mason. It was who enabled him, who looked the other way, who promoted him even when the numbers didn't add up. I became a symbol, not because I was brave, but because I was the first to break the silence. But the silence had its cost. My sister called less, and my parents didn't know what to say. I had destroyed something huge, yes, but I had also betrayed people. People I once mentored, teams I once led. Some said I should have just walked away, found another job, let the company rot from the inside quietly. But I couldn't, not after what they did to me, to us. To the interns, laid off unfairly to cover ghost invoices. Oh, tea. To the junior staff whose bonuses vanished while Mason's yacht got longer. To every late night I stayed behind fixing what his vision broke. I didn't blow up a company, I exposed the rot. And then 6 months after the first subpoena came the most unexpected moment of all. A knock on my door. No cameras, no press, just one man. Clean-shaven, well-dressed, but thinner than I remembered. Paler. It was Mason. I didn't speak, just stared at him. He looked like a ghost of himself. Elliot, he said, his voice hoarse, I need your help. I almost laughed. You've got some nerve, I replied. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just said, they froze everything. I'm facing prison. They want a statement from me, tying it all together. But I need something from you first. What could I possibly give you? He swallowed hard. Forgiveness. I left him standing there. Maybe it was cruel, maybe not. But you don't get to burn a man's life down and then ask him to hand you water when your own house catches fire. What Mason never understood is that some men don't want power. Some men want peace, justice, closure. And sometimes the only way to get that is to become the storm. The best revenge is not destruction, it's resurrection. I didn't answer Mason that day. I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched, the weight of everything he'd built now crashing down on top of him. He never turned back to see if I was still watching. And that in itself told me everything. He came to me not out of remorse, but out of survival. I wasn't the only one who saw through it. The prosecutors did too. They gave him one chance, a reduced sentence, if he named the names above him, around him, and below. But Mason was loyal only to power. And when power fled, he stood alone. 3 weeks later, the headlines broke. Former CEO Mason Rourke sentenced to 14 years in federal prison for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction. And there it was, the end of a story that had nearly destroyed me. Or so I thought. People called, old colleagues, even reporters. Everyone wanted a statement. Some wanted vindication. Others wanted me to admit that it had all been a vendetta. I gave them nothing. What I had done, the quiet meetings with investigators, the sleepless nights drafting reports, the constant fear of being found out, it wasn't for the world. It was for every person Mason used like a pawn. For every kid right out of school who believed that hard work would protect them. For every woman whose ideas were stolen in conference rooms. For every voice he silenced under the weight of his charm and his title. And for the version of myself I had almost become jaded, silent, complicit. 2 months later, I stood in front of the building I helped design. It was strange coming back. The sign was gone. The branding had changed. The board had sold the company off in pieces, trying to keep what was still legal intact. Only 2 people recognized me, the front desk guard, who gave me a sad smile, and Alicia, my old intern, who now led the very team Mason once ran. She walked up to me, holding a small dusty box. "I found this in storage," she said. "It was labeled Elliott 10-year plaque. They never gave it to you." I opened it, just a wooden board. My name engraved in gold, 10 years of service. I laughed. Then I thanked her and walked away, or I didn't need a plaque to tell me who I was. I knew now. The next chapter of my life wasn't some grand redemption arc. It was smaller, more human. I took on consulting work not for pay, but for principle, helping small startups avoid the traps that I once ignored, teaching ethics, risk management, real leadership. I visited schools, spoke to students, not with big lessons, but simple ones. The real test of character is what you do when no one is watching and how you act when everyone finally is. And then one quiet afternoon I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. "You didn't save the company. You saved the people." There was no name, but I didn't need one. Sometimes karma doesn't knock down the door. Sometimes it opens a window and lets the truth climb in. And when it does, all you have to do is let it stay.